The essential features of strategic family therapy. The original goal of communications family therapy was to improve communication. Still, as the goal was refined to altering problem maintaining patterns, three strategic models evolved. MRI, Haley and Medanes, and Milan Associates. The MRI approach is based on cybernetic theory. Problems are thought to persist when families continue to pursue solutions that don't work. Therapy consists of identifying failed solutions and reversing them. Jay Haley viewed family problems as stemming from struggles for power and control. He combined structural and strategic approaches in his treatment. Tasks and directives are central in Haley's problem solving therapy. The Milan Associates aim to interrupt destructive family patterns by reframing the motives behind family members' behavior. Their positive connotations praise family members for having the family's interest at heart, while simultaneously describing their behavior as part of a dysfunctional pattern. What makes strategic family therapy distinct from other family therapy models? Answer: it focuses on solving problems through planned interventions rather than covering root causes, and often employs strategies such as directives and paradoxes. Evolution of the model, the communications model that emerged from Palo Alto in the 1950s, had an enormous impact on the field of family therapy. Its leaders developed a treatment that focused on the process of communication rather than on its content. The paradigms of communication theory, derived from general systems theory, cybernetics, and information theory, were so well received that they were eventually absorbed into virtually all schools of family therapy, who are some of the foundational figures in strategic family therapy, and what were their contributions. Answer: Milton Erickson inspired brief, solution focused therapy. Gregory Bateson contributed systems theory. Jay Haley and the Missy Group developed structured, problem focused interventions. Its leaders developed a therapy that focused on the process of communication rather than on its content. The paradigms of communication theory, derived from general systems theory, cybernetics, and information theory, were so well received that they were eventually absorbed into virtually all schools of family discussion. How did Jay Haley and Chloe Madden's influence the development of strategic family therapy? Answer: they blended structural principles with strategic techniques, emphasizing hierarchies and life cycle stages in family. The basic model communications theory is described as rule-governed systems maintained by homeostatic feedback mechanisms. These properties account for the stability in normal families and the inflexibility of dysfunctional families. The communications approach focused on what went on between rather than within family members. The black box principle ignored the internal complexities of individuals and concentrated on their input and output. Likewise, the past was disregarded as focusing on ongoing sequences of behavior seen as mutually reinforcing. In their popular account of Bateson's schizophrenia project, Pragmatics of Human Communication, Watzlawick et al., 1967, put forth several axioms about the interpersonal impact of communication. First, one cannot communicate, given that all behavior is communicative. Everything one does has a communicative impact. Second, all messages have both a report and a command function. The reported content of a message conveys information directly, while the command or implication conveys a statement about the definition of the relationship. In healthy relationships, the command aspect of communication remains in the background, whereas problematic relationships are characterized by struggles about the nature of the relationship. Relationships are defined as either complementary, different in ways that fit together, or symmetrical, similar, and often competing. The hallmark of strategic therapies are novel strategies designed for solving family problems. Their theories are more pragmatic than other approaches because they are more interested in change than analysis. Insight and understanding are eschewed in favor of task and directives. Moreover, because strategic therapists prefer to circumvent rather than confront resistance, their directives are sometimes paradoxical. Milton Erickson had a major impact on the thinking of strategic therapists. He practiced a problem-focused approach to treatment, believed that people can change quickly, and that therapists were responsible for treatment success. Many paradoxical techniques in use today were based on his application of hypnotic principles to resistant patients. Discussion question: what communication principles underlie strategic family therapy? Answer: all communication has both report and command functions, and families operate through rules, feedback loops, and homeostasis. The hallmark of strategic therapies are novel strategies designed for solving family problems. Their theories are more pragmatic than other approaches because they're more interested in change than analysis. Insight and understanding are eschewed in favor of tasks and directives. Moreover, because strategic therapists prefer to circumvent rather than confront resistance, their directives are sometimes paradoxical. Milton Erickson had a major impact on the thinking of strategic therapists. He practiced a problem focused approach to treatment, believed that people can change quickly, and that therapists were responsible for treatment success. Many paradoxical techniques in use today were based on his application of hypnotic principles to resistant patients. What is the difference between first order and second order change in family therapy? Answer: first order change modifies behavior within a system. Second order change transforms the system itself. Normal family development theory. Their approach to problems is based on cybernetic theory. Treatment consists of identifying feedback loops that surround problems, identifying family rules that maintain those interactions, and finding a way to change the feedback loops or rules through reframing and directives. The approach is pragmatic, time limited, and problem focused. Haley and Medanes. Haley emphasized the vertical elements of structure: who's up and who's down in a family's hierarchy. He saw all human interactions as struggles for control. Haley combined aspects of the structural and strategic approaches into his style of treating families. Although his techniques tended to be strategic, Haley's assessment of problems, conceptualization of family dynamics, and goals for treatment were structural. A family's dysfunctional sequences are maintained by hierarchy and boundary problems. One of Haley's unique contributions was his therapy in stages approach, which encouraged therapists to develop game plans for the overall course of therapy. Madane also emphasized the function of the symptom aspect of problems, particularly the incongruous hierarchy created when children use their symptoms to try to manipulate their parents. She categorizes family problems according to four basic intentions: with desire to dominate and control, to desire to be loved and protect others, and for the desire to repent and forgive. Milan Associates. Like Haley, this group focused on power games in the family. The Milan Associates also focused on several generations of a family and used a multi-generational perspective to understand symptom development. Their hypotheses involved elaborate networks of covert family alliances across generations. They believed that patients use symptoms to protect other family members in order to maintain the network of family coalitions. How do Mystery and Haley Havanese differ in their definition of a normal? Me avoids defining normalcy, focusing instead on problem resolution, while Haley Havanese emphasized structure and parental authority. Normal families were described by communications theorists as systems regulated by two processes: negative feedback or civility and positive feedback or flexibility. Researchers studying children at high risk for psychiatric disorders have concluded that clear and logical communication on the part of parents is most important in promoting healthy adjustment in children. The Misrai group believes that there is no one model of normality for families. Therefore, it is a mistake to impose any such framework on clients. They take no position on how families should behave and confine their task to eliminating the problems families present. Haley and Madani's assumptions about normal family functioning are based on structural theory. They also emphasize the impact of life cycle stages on a family structure. The Milan Associates also maintained the non-imposition stance with respect to family functioning. They held no preconceived normative model or goals for their families, and strove to maintain an attitude of neutrality or curiosity. The strategic therapists view family development. Answers clarity in family roles and adaptability across life cycle stages rather than applying a fixed model of normalcy. Development of behavior disorders. The function of symptoms from the communications perspective was to maintain the equilibrium of family systems. Dysfunctional families were seen as trapped and unproductive, but powerful homeostatic patterns of communication. Novelty was treated not as an opportunity for growth, but as a threat to resist. Destructive negative feedback loops exist when families fail to accommodate changed circumstances, as, for example, by responding to an adolescent's striving for independence as negative feedback and continuing to treat him or her as a young child. A destructive positive feedback loop, or runaway, would be illustrated by an argument that escalates into a violent confrontation because neither side listens to the other and both insist on having last word. There are three explanations among the strategic models for the way problems develop. The cybernetic view held by the MRA group. Difficulties become problems through persisting and misguided attempted solutions that form positive feedback escalations. The structural view shared by Haley Medanes and the Milan Associates. Problems result from flaws in a family's hierarchy and boundaries. The functional view shared by Haley, Medanes and the Milan Associates. Problems result from people protecting or controlling each other indirectly, so that problems serve a function for the family system. Discussion question: what stance does the Milan group take toward normal family functioning? Answer: they adopt neutrality, avoiding judgments and focusing instead on systemic dynamics. How therapy works initially. Communication therapists sought merely to improve communication within client families. Later, they concentrated on altering specifically those communicative interactions surrounding a family's presenting problem, because they began to see relationships among families and between families and therapists as struggles for control. Therapy became a power struggle in which therapists sought to manipulate families into changing their patterns of interaction. Discussion question: how are symptoms viewed in strategic family therapy? Answer: as strategies to maintain equilibrium or as communication signals within dysfunctional family systems. Therapy assessment Maya group. Therapy works by bringing about a reversal of problem maintaining sequences. According to the Maya group, no insight or reorganization of family relationships is required for change to occur. Haley and Medanes. Haley's goal was the structural reorganization of family hierarchy and generational boundaries. His intermediate goals were to resolve the family's presenting problem. Mendance expanded her goals to include the development of harmony and balance in the family's lives, for them to love each other and experience being loved. This version of strategic therapy relied heavily on reframing and the use of creative directives. Discussion question: what are the two primary strategies that strategic therapists use to promote change? Answer: insight based on pointing out sequences and action based blocking sequences. Interventions. Milan Associates. Goals of the early Milan team consisted of interrupting family games and reframing motives for family members' behaviors. They did so using positive connotation, a double-edged statement that praised family members, especially the identified patient, for having the family's interests at heart, while at the same time describing their behavior as part of a dysfunctional pattern. Silvini Palazzoli and Prada focus on disrupting and exposing the dirty games that family members play with each other. Boscolo and Section strove to collaborate with families to form systemic hypotheses about problems and help the family decide whether they want to keep those problems. What assessment focus is unique to strategic family therapy? Answer: it centers on understanding how the problem is maintained rather than historical causes. Therapy techniques Mari. Assessment consists of carefully defining the presenting problem and then figuring out what in the way the family has been responding to it is responsible for perpetuating it. Because misguided solutions turn out to be the real problem, these are what Memai therapists concentrate on discovering. How do Milan therapists use circular questioning during assessment? Answer: to explore relational patterns and systemic influence without assigning blame. Haley and Medanes. The Washington School approach also begins with a careful elucidation of the presenting problem, and the sequences of interactions surrounding it. But these therapists also attempt to figure out what kinds of structural anomalies, especially weak parental hierarchies and cross generational coalitions, may underlie a family's problems. They also consider what the interpersonal payoff of an identified patient's symptoms might be, e.g., not having to go out and find a job. The idea that people get something out of their symptoms has been rejected by most family therapists because they see it as a version of blaming the victim. Haley's point wasn't that people develop to manipulate others, but that symptoms, once they develop, may come to play a role in the interpersonal struggles of a family. It was this covert function of symptoms that Haley was interested in exploring. Discussion question: why is identifying the most motivated person important in Mari brief therapy? Answer: that person often initiates or sustains change within the family system. Milan Associates. The Mylan team comes up with a preliminary hypothesis based on the assumption that the presenting symptoms serve homeostatic or protective functions for the family, and then test this hypothesis via circular questioning. The goal of the assessment is to arrive at a systemic explanation for the function of presenting complaints in the family's ecology. Discussion question: what is the therapeutic paradox, and how is it used? Answer: it's an instruction that appears to go against the desired change, disrupting dysfunctional patterns indirectly. Imre's Brief Therapy Center follows a 6-step treatment procedure conducted in a maximum of 10 sessions. 1. Introduction to the treatment setup. 2. Inquiry and definition of the problem. 3. Estimation of the behavior maintaining the problem. 4. Setting goals for treatment. 5. Selecting and making behavioral interventions. 6. Termination. Haley blended strategic techniques with structural goals for treatment. His approach to an initial interview consisted of 4 stages. 1. Greeting family, making them comfortable. 2. Problem stage: elicit each member's view of the problem. 3. Interaction stage: observe the family discuss their problem. 4. Select targets for change discussion. Question: what is Haley's 5 interview stages in therapy? Answer: social, problem, interactional, goal setting, and task oriented stages. Tasks and directives play a central role in Haley's problem solving therapy. Madanes uses a range of pretend techniques and directives to bypass resistance. She also developed a clinically based 16-step model for treating families in cases of sexual abuse. Some of these steps include getting the abuser to apologize to the victim while on his knees, getting the family to apologize for not protecting the victim, and making sure that the abuse does not recur. Discussion question: what is the purpose of positive connotation in the Milan model? Answer: it reframes problems as meaningful, preserving family dignity and reducing resistance. Haley stages of the first interview. The social stage, the current form of Haley and Madness therapy, called strategic humanism, still involves giving directives based on the therapist's hypotheses. However, these directives are more oriented toward increasing family members' abilities to soothe and love than to gain control over one another, thus shifting the focus away from the power elements of hierarchy and toward finding ways to increase harmony in families. The Milan model. The original Milan model was highly strategic. Sessions were held once a month for a maximum of 10 sessions. Treatment sessions had a standard format: 1. Pre-session 2, Session 3, Intersession 4, Intervention 5, Post-session discussion. The primary intervention consisted of either a ritual or a positive connotation. Following the Milan team split, Savini Palazzoli and Prata maintained the model's strategic bent, stopped using paradoxical interventions, and began assigning a specific ritual called the invariant prescription to all families they treated. Boscolo and Section drifted toward a more collaborative, non-directive style of therapy. Their therapy centers around circular questioning as a result of the evolution of family therapy away from strategizing toward collaborating. The original Milan model has been replaced. Discussion question: how do rituals and neutrality support change in Milan therapy? Answer: rituals expose family myths. Neutrality prevents the therapist's alignment with one perspective. Discussion question: what is the goal of the social stage in the first interview? Answer: to build rapport and reduce resistance by ensuring everyone is heard before diving into